the Harbour rework has been a long time in the making, and the general consensus now that it's been released to the public or revealed to the public has been pretty negative. And I think that the main component of that is to do with losing Cascade to Storm Surge, and also to lose or to just still have the allied slow on the High Tide. But I want to talk about some of the more positive things and why those things don't matter as much, or why they're more justifiable. So, and also I think the bit on the Reckoning as well. The Reckoning is also something that a lot of people don't like. But I want to talk about the reason why I think that is the case and why I'm overall positive on all these changes. So High Tide is no longer the signature. And I think it makes a lot of sense it makes a lot of sense for one reason, and then there's another reason which I don't particularly like it not being signature for. So the main reason why it's not signature, at least as far as I can tell, is that it's about the amount of utility in the game, right? We already talked about this with all the utility reworks on everyone. Basically, the full game rework, we had in terms of utility timers and all that kind of thing. This fits with that, right? So a lot of the complaints that I see with Harbour losing utility from his rework is just in line with everyone else losing their utility. He lost the same amount of utility, in my opinion, as everyone else did in a lot of ways. The downside to the High Tide not being the signature anymore is that it's no longer going to be as versatile as it once was. Before, you basically could use it to take site, and you could use it some other way. You could use it at the start of the round, the default, and then take the site later, or you could use it at the start to take site, and then you could use it to barrier people off or make little pockets of space and that kind of thing. You no longer have opportunity to do that because it's the only smoke you have. So you have to be the only smoke you have to take site. Cove can't be used that way, really. It's fine, but it's only one smoke, so you're not going to really take sites with it very often by itself. And you don't have Cascade anymore, so you can't really do that. Maybe Reckoning could be part of that puzzle, but you only get that once every 7 orbs. So it's not really viable to think about it that way. So to me, you lose the versatility of High Tide. And I think that's a really big shame, because I think this is one of the more fun abilities in the game, and honestly one of the more skill expressive abilities in the game. And I think that's one of the reasons why it also saw some pro players, because you could really outbrain your opponents with this ability sometimes. And very big shame. All players crossing High Tide are slowed. I think it's important for enemies to be slowed for his stopping power on defense, but I think the allies thing has kind of been outgrown by the rework, because I think in the old version of Harbour, it actually kind of made sense. And I'm going to talk about the whole kit here with Harbour, and that's because I want to talk about something his positioning now in the meta. Because in the old version of Harbour, he basically was a full controller on his basic kit. He was a really strong initiator on his ultimate, but then the way he played was kind of like a controller sentinel hybrid. So he had a bunch of smokes, making him quite fairly controller-like. He had the really strong initiator ability, which revealed a lot of positions and could take space very well, which is very initiator-like and very strong initiator-like, really like a Fade ult, right? Even better than a Fade ult in some cases, in a lot of cases actually. And then the way he played was I'm going to take space, which is very controller-like, but then he's also going to play very sentinel-like because he wants to retain that space with the slows and with the Cove, right, with the shield. So it made a lot of sense. And the Cascade would also apply the slow as well. So you could control a lot of space and stop people from getting in. It was very sentinel-like. And to me, they wanted to move away from that sentinel sort of part about him. And all players makes me feel like they're not abandoning that part of him. And the reason for that is because basically, if it was all enemies, that would still be enemies and not allies. That would be very sentinel-like as well. But because it's all players, it basically says that we want you to take a certain amount of space with Harbour, but we don't want you to push past the line that you have drawn. And that's very sentinel-like, right? That's you shouldn't push past that space. You've already drawn the line in the sand with your High Tide. You can't go further than that. You're going to get slowed. You don't want to make a set player beyond that play. That's what that says to me, right? And I think that makes sense, especially for old Harbour, with the way that he played. That makes a lot of sense to me. It's obviously not fun, because in solo queue, those types of blunders to move through, run through a smoke and get kills, that can be fun, right? And obviously I understand why people don't like it, but it made sense in old Harbour. Does it make sense in the new Harbour? I think yes and no. Maybe. Because High Tide is still the same. It kind of makes sense. You're still drawing that line in the sand. do you want to push past that line in the sand? And the thing is that his new abilities, Reckoning, the new version of Reckoning, which I'll talk about when we get to it, and Storm Surge, which I'll also talk about when we get to it, they are kind of pushing that forward. And even the way you place Cove, which I'll also talk about when we get to it. But that's what I want to talk about here, because it was all players crossing the high tide are slowed. It's the important line. I wanted to really talk about that. And that's the reason why I think that the slow is maybe on the fence and probably will get removed, is that the rest of his kit has kind of got more aggressive. And so it makes sense that he would be pushing past that line now, rather than his old version of his kit, which was a lot less aggressive, at least a bit less aggressive than his current version of it. Next is Storm Surge. And I think a lot of people are going to be sad about losing Cascade, but the truth is, like, what were you going to lose, right? You weren't going to lose High Tide. It was the premier ability for you to take Sight with. You weren't going to lose Cove. It was one of his unique identities, one of his more important parts of being viable on some certain maps, things like Icebox, right? Very important to that map to have some way to plant very easily. He brought that, and that was a part of his identity, part of his uniqueness. So you couldn't really lose those two abilities, so you kind of had to lose Cascade. It's simple as that, right? Even though Cascade was the more fun ability, or was, I would say, second most fun ability, because I think High Tide is actually more fun, personally. But Cascade was definitely a really fun ability to have, but it was just the one that was least definitive to the way that he played, and also kind of perpetuated some of the more unhealthy parts of his play, which was, you don't want to have endless smokes, right? And he could kind of do like High Tide into Cascade, and then wait a tiny bit of time, and then he has another High Tide. So it was kind of adding to a lot of the unhealthy parts of the game, and it had to go, basically. And I, as much as I hate it, I agree. Right? As much as I hate to agree, I agree. Because I did really love that ability, but it's gone. And I think it makes a lot more sense they maybe put it on a future controller, because I think a lot of people, if they see how much people like the Cascade, I imagine it will make its way onto a future controller at some point. That maybe has a bit more of a well-rounded kit overall, and doesn't require it to be moved off of the kit and keep the unique identity. So Storm Surge in itself is a pretty fine ability. It's not a kit defining ability. You're not going to play Harbor because it has Storm Surge in the same way you don't play Waylay because it has that slow as well. Because this is basically what it is, right? It's just it's exactly the same, right? So to me, you're not going to play Harbor for this ability because it's not super strong, but it is a really nice thing to have and helps and supplements your aggression. Exactly the same as Waylay, in my opinion. Then we have Cove. Cove, to me, is very interesting now, because keeping in line with what I was talking about with the aggression, and also being a lot more clear in his like game plan, right? He has a lot less Sentinel in him, more Initiator and Controller in him, so a lot less Sentinel gameplay. This goes into that, right? You no longer have to have like a lineup if you want to have an aggressive Cove. You can always place the Cove kind of within reason of where you want it to be, which makes it more inherently aggressive, right? Because you can place it further forward with way less cost. So it's inherently more aggressive. So you can do these more aggressive plays. It's more Initiator-like in the way that you can apply the controller ability, right? It's more aggressive. So I think that overall, this could mean that Cove is played a lot differently than what we saw, but it could be that now you just have either a version of the two, which is like, sometimes I'll play like old Cove, I'll place it to plant the bomb, etc., to hold space, but I can also use it in different rounds like this. Or I can use it even because it's the signature and it recharges. You can use it aggressive in one part of the round and then defensive in another part of the round. So I really like the direction of Cove. I think that it's actually, they've done a really good job of Cove. And I really like the way that it's balanced. I think it makes a lot of sense. So I really like it. Yeah, but I do think that as well, it might even have like the one-way stuff you can do, which could be interesting too, giving Harbor a one-way, another way that he could be aggressive, similar to Omen. So yeah, I really like the Cove. I think the Cove makes a lot of sense. I'm very happy with it. Reckoning, so this is something I want to explain or talk about, is that I think the Reckoning makes more sense the way it is because it's less powerful. It takes up less power budget. It means that the rest of the kit could get better. Because in the old kit, think about it like this, right? If you have a really strong Initiator ult, first of all, the ult isn't really going to take up too much of the power budget in some ways because it's not used that much in comparison to the rest of the abilities. But it is still going to take up a large portion of the power budget if it's very strong, right? It's going to have more orbs, etc., and it's going to have to not be as powerful if the rest of your abilities really synergize with it very well. Thankfully, it didn't synergize too well with Harbor, and that was also part of his problem. But overall, it means now with the weaker Reckoning, he can have a stronger base kit. And also this Reckoning kind of goes in with what he wants to do. It's less recon heavy, where he can play a bit more passively to get recon with it, etc., or that kind of thing, right? It's more a go button. You want to go in with this ult. You want to not just find where they are, because you can't do that anymore. It doesn't show any information, but you want to go in and actually clear these angles. Like, so it makes it more aggressive in its application. You want to use this ult to actually take space rather than the old one. You wanted to find where they were and then take the space. So you'd use it as a recon ability to then use util to then take that space. That makes sense, right? So to me, it fits more with the way that he wants to play. And I think that makes more sense. They have a very much more of a clear vision for Harbor, which on his old kit, it didn't feel that way. At least maybe they did feel like they had a clear vision, but the players picked up on it in a very different way, and it felt strong in a very different way than what they were anticipating, making it very hard for them to actually balance it. But this one, it kind of has the same amount of balance levels as the old one, but it doesn't have as much of a power budget taken up, so it means that the rest of the kit kind of can have some of the balance kind of removed or given at any given time. So I do think that overall, Harbor is in a better state, whether it be that he's in a better state because he has a very much more of a clear path forward, or whether he's currently stronger now. I don't think he's currently stronger now, I'll be honest. I think he's like kind of the same, like maybe a bit better overall, like marginally, mainly due to the fact that Cove is a lot better in my opinion. But you do lose the high tide versatility, you do lose the Cascade, and the Cascade was quite fun and also quite good in a lot of situations. A lot of very, very oppressive in the right situations as well. And you lose all that, and you gain some like mediocre Storm Surge, and the ult has got worse. So overall, you could definitely argue that he is worse. But for the balance of the game, and also for pushing him more into line and to make him more balanced, he's definitely got better in that way. His design is definitely a lot better. So for me, he just needs some time to cook, which means that it's like the perfect time for them to update him, because now they can buff him in time for when he might even see play. So I'm pretty happy with when they've decided to make this change and the changes they've made overall. That's why I'm positive on the changes, because I do think in the future it will be better for Harbor. It might have lost some of his like initial audience though. That's the only thing. That's one of the few things as well that like really aren't that great. Because some of his initial audience may have liked the Cascade a lot, may have liked the fact that he had the info ult as well. But unfortunately, that's a sacrifice that has had to be made to push him more into the hybrid role of controller initiator and take away some of his sentinel elements, take away some of his stronger initiator elements, and make him more of a hybrid. So I like the changes, but I'd love to know what your opinions are as well in the comments. If you want to see more content like this, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next one.